Tanin Auto Electronics here. Today we're going to show you how to install our Lamborghini Gallardo gauge face. So you'll need a T10 Torx driver, 4 screws on the back here, and 2 on the top. Okay, once that's done, grab a flathead or something to separate the lens from the back portion. Just work your way around. Just find each of these tabs and gently separate the lens from the back housing. You'll have to probably break one of these stickers on the back, as they just go over each of the 2 components that you're separating. Okay, so the back portion should come straight off. Then you're left with this. So now you want to disconnect these small connectors. Okay, once that's done, this will come out of the lens. Now take note of where these needles are right now. You can move them clockwise, and then if you move them counterclockwise, you'll feel them basically stop. So when you take these off, put them on, note the position that the needle is in. So this one is right underneath, or I guess on the lower half of that hash mark. So a good practice is to put some tape down and use a Sharpie or something to mark where this needle is. Ideally, when you power it on, they should be resting at 0. So sometimes this is not the best way of doing it, because you can put it on a little bit off of your mark. Needles just spin off like you just saw, and this cover just comes straight off. There's 2 little clips here. Now obviously if we're switching the cover, we can't transfer this tape to the new one, but just know that when you plug in the cluster, the needles should move very small amount right on the lower hash mark of basically what we can call 0. So we'll set that aside, and then we'll get our gauge face. Whichever one you want to use or purchase. We have the Superleggera style black gauge face, there's a white gauge face, and then we have KPH to MPH conversion face. So that one's going to remove the KMH entirely, and then you're just going to have your mile-an-hour gauge face. It's going to look just like this one for imported vehicles to the US primarily. Okay, so then installation of the new face. You want to make sure that you push it underneath these 2 little clips. That's very important. There's 2 little retainer clips at the 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock position on the cluster itself. And that basically holds the gauge face down and prevents the needle from sticking on it. And that's it. So that's the easy part. And now again, to set these, we're gonna want, you can set it to, you can try setting it to 0 and see what happens. In some cases you may have to set it slightly under 0. And I'll show you. So it looks like we're good here, except the mile an hour now you can see is a little bit higher than where it should be. So that means we're going to set it just slightly under 0. And it raises up ever so slightly. So that looks good right there. Now this is complete, so we can set this aside, and now we're going to work on the fuel and temp gauge. So situated here. Now you're going to need probably a small flathead tool, like something like this. And you're going to need to pop this entire assembly out of the lens housing. Make sure not to touch the lens here like I just did, because you'll get fingerprints in there. So here's a good spot to pry, right in between the black portion and the white plastic you can see down there. Sorry about the light, but if I turn it on we get a little bit of a glare. So we'll try it like this for a little bit. So again, right in between this white plastic and the black lens assembly, and you should pop it. You should hear it pop, and then it'll come right out. So now for this, look where that is. It's not on the red, it's slightly under the red. So we're going to keep that in mind. Just pull it off. Same process on and you can see the little clip there on the bottom. This one just has it on the bottom, not on the top. Is a very small one on the top. So just put it back on. You may need a flat tool to seat it under the tab there. Again, that's the only thing that holds this thing to the assembly. Alright, so we're going to put this back right where we took it off, right about there. And then to put it back in, seat the bottom first and then pop the top in. Is usually the best way of getting it in there. You can see the difference between OEM and the SL style, if you will. And over here, very easily pops straight out of there. Now you can see this one is pretty much on that last hash mark. It's not entirely on it. It's just half the needle is on it and half of it is off of it, if that makes sense. You can see better from this angle. I mean, it's not going to make a world of a difference if you're off by a few millimeters, but we like to be accurate. Okay, get rid of that. And now it's probably best to fix the light there. Seat this under the larger tab on the bottom first, just like so, and then push it down under the top. And that's all that holds this thing to the white plastic. And again, it prevents the needle from sticking on the face too. So I'd say that's about good right there. Pop that straight back in. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think so. So this you basically just put upside down, make sure all your wires are visible. It sets right in there, it doesn't click or anything. Put your wires back in. Like so. Fix the focus for you. These blue wires go under this little plastic tab here. There's like a little prong. Get under there. Okay. And then the back will go right back on the same way it came off. Snaps back in place. And then the screws back in. Next video, we will show the auxiliary gauge pod installation and power this thing on so you can see what it looks like. Okay, the next portion of the video is the auxiliary gauge pod. To remove this, there are two T20 Torx bits screws that hold this to the instrument panel dash assembly right here. So you pop the top panel off, it's stuck literally on with this Velcro, not Velcro, but the hook and loop type attachment. So you pop that off and then access the two T20 bits and it comes right out, plugs right there. So just pop these plastic tabs and remove the face, just like so. Now, these are not the same motors as the speedometer. You can see they come back down slowly. It's a different design. And also it has these pins in here to prevent the needles from going any further. So the first step is to take some type of pliers or tool, grasp these firmly at the bottom, and it should come straight out very easily. And now you'll see this needle is going to go down further because that's just the design of that type of motor. So same with this one. You probably don't even need this. They're not in there very tightly. Okay. So now if you have a 12 volt battery or power source or DC power supply like we do here, oh, I gotta take this off first. This would be the easiest. I mean, the second easiest way for somebody without specialized tools would be to get to this point, plug it in, turn the ignition to on, and then these needles will they'll move where they need to go. And then you can mark them and then put on the new face, put the needles on where they're supposed to go. So with that said, let me get this off of here. Sometimes it doesn't hurt to have a flat head or something to help you so you're not struggling with your fingertips getting this off. That comes off pretty easily. Okay, now according to my notes here, this is ground, and looks like this one is power. So we're going to turn this on, and now you'll see the gauges are going to come back to life. Our power source here says we're at 13.5 volts. Let's just get that down to 13 to be consistent. Now obviously it's not going to read exactly the same as what your power supply says, because maybe the power supply is not entirely accurate, or maybe this isn't entirely accurate, or it's calibrated differently, so on and so forth. So you'll see the resting point when this gauge pod is powered on is actually lower than 0. So I'm just going to remember that this is slightly below 13. It should be on 13, but I'm not sure the accuracy again. And then these two Now what you can do is, again, we're not using, you can't really use this on the new one, but it'll give you an idea, just as a reference point, where these things need to go. So put a dot right there, dot right there. And see, this one even sunk down a little bit further. So we're going to let that sit where it wants to sit. Somewhere in there. Okay. And now there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can see where this needle is, basically the top of the needle is at the bottom of the hole that you put the pin in. So that's one way you can remember it for alignment purposes next when you get it back in. Same with this. The top of this needle is basically flush with the bottom of the pinhole. So if you stick on the new one, that's where you should be. So we'll give it a shot. Now these will be on a little bit tighter. You'll probably need a flathead. Grasp the base of the needle so you don't break it, and then use a flathead on the back side. Just twist the flathead clockwise. You're just turning it, raising it up, and pulling the needle out. Okay. So this is very easy. Actually, I'm not sure. Yeah, this one is actually stuck on with a little bit of glue. Not a big deal. Peel that thing off. Stick the new one on. Whether or not you want to use glue or something just to keep it stuck, because there's nothing really holding this down now. And whatever residual glue that was on here is holding it down. And then obviously the cover will probably hold it down too. But if you want to put a little bit of contact cement or something on the back side of this just to make sure it doesn't come down, you can do that. Alright, so looks like we are looks like that'll work. Make sure to push them down all the way firmly. And this one, make sure you guys can see that. So what you want to do is just very gently put it on the motor to see where it sits. Don't push it down all the way right away. Just very gently. Just kind of set it on there to see where it wants to go. And so the oil temp looks pretty good where it is. It's the top of the needle is pretty much flush with the bottom of the hole. Oil is a little bit high, oil pressure, so we'll take this one off and we'll just seat it down a little bit further. That looks good. Comparable to our original. Okay, well, that's it. We'll put this down firmly. You can turn these needles when it's on. It doesn't matter. It's not going to hurt anything. Make sure these are all nice and firmly seated. And now here's where your tool might come in handy to hold on to this and just push it back into the hole, just like so. Just like that. And like that. So, I want to make sure you get all the fingerprint smudges or anything that might be on these gauge faces before you put it all back together. Otherwise it might drive you crazy. If you're looking at your gauges and there's a speck of dust or something on it. Okay. This just pops right back together. And as does this. And that's it. Look at that. Perfect. Alright, so then next video I'll show you the cluster turned on, and then the next part after that will be everything installed back in the car, everything turned on, and vehicle running so you can see all the gauges functioning correctly. Okay, here we have our cluster powered on, and you can see everything's functioning correctly there. That's all the lamps that we have. So you'll see, even though this is a 2004 early model, it still has the front suspension icon. So they had this planned before 2003 or 2004. If you use this on a Spider, I've noticed that the immobilizer key is actually replaced with the top-down icon. We'll try to work on that in the future, but I mean, really, it's just this one icon so far that I've seen. So if your top goes down, you'll see a car with a key. But other than that, some more warning lights there. And so a lot of these functions we use when we test the clusters. Just to make sure everything's working properly. There you see the back lighting, the white lighting is functioning correctly, the needles are all lit up. And that's it. So we'll install this in a vehicle and get one final video of everything in place working. And I hope this video was easy to follow and answered some questions you might have. So on to next part. Alright, here you see the gauges installed. Looks very nice. It's the auxiliary pod, and then here we've got the main speedometer installation. So very cool look to get away from the stock looking gauge face. Also a lot cleaner without the kph on there. Keep in mind that we can do LED conversion services for you. We can change the backlighting to blue, green, yellow, I mean whatever color you want we can do. If you get a replacement instrument cluster or something happens, we can correct the odometers on these. You know, anything really related to gauges, instruments, speedometers we can do. So hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you enjoyed these gauges if you purchased them. If you haven't, please do so. Very cool upgrade. You don't have to buy a Superleggera cluster. You can get these gauge faces at half the price, and you can update the look of your old Gallardo. So thanks for watching. Again, this is Tanin Auto Electronics, and take care.